Monster Hunter World Iceborne's endgame can be a challenge for the best of hunters out there, but with the right weapons and builds, even endgame tasks can easily be achieved. I'm Darcblade, and we're back with even more amazing builds for Monster Hunter World Iceborne. In this episode, we're taking a look at endgame builds for the Heavy Bowgun. The Heavy Bowgun is a very powerful weapon in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, able to deal out some of the highest damage in the game, and this is thanks to the different types of ammunition the Heavy Bowgun has available to it. Specialising on one of the various ammunition types normally allow you to craft a build that excels in dealing damage in a specific area. The builds I use highlight this, with each specialising in one of the different ammunition types the Heavy Bowgun has. Also, when it comes to the different ammunition types that the Heavy Bowguns can use, different bowguns can utilise the various ammunition types more effectively. Some come with reduced recoil, while others have larger clip capacities when using a set ammo type. Now, a disclaimer for this series though, these builds are aimed for endgame hunters who have completed the main story and have access to all armors and weapons the game has to offer. A large jewel collection is also desired, but you can always swap out jewels here and there if you do not have the same ones that is shown in this video. So the first build I use is the Spread Heavy Bowgun build. This build focuses all around using the spread-free ammunition, thus it's a close range DPS build. So for this build you'll need the Golden Headdress beta, the Kirin Jacket beta, the Shara Ishvalda's Bracelet beta, Golden Obi beta, and the Garuga Greaves beta. I'm also using a Razor Sharp charm, and for my weapon I'm using the Stygian Humilitas, which is the Stygian Zinogre Heavy Bowgun. This has an attack increase augmentation, affinity increase augmentation, and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. But if you don't have the Stygian Zinogre Heavy Bowgun, you can always use the standard Zinogre Heavy Bowgun for almost the same results. But anyway, let's move on to the jewels. As I said at the start of this video, remember you can swap out jewels here and there if you don't have what is shown in this video. First of all, I've gone for spread jewels for that spread shot skill. I've then gone for vitality jewels for health boost, challenger jewels to max out agitator, expert jewels for some critical eye, a critical jewel for the crit boost skill, and you'll have one jewel to play around with, to which I've gone for KO jewel. As for the jewels in the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for KO jewels to max out the slugger skill when we're wearing the impact mantle, and protection jewels for some divine blessing when we're wearing the protection mantle. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 465 with a 50% base affinity rating. This can easily be 100% when you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have average deviation. As for the custom mods, I've gone for close range up custom mods, ×4 to increase the damage when we're at close range, and a shield mod. Putting a shield mod on your Heavy Bowgun allows you to block incoming attacks when you're aiming, so long as you're not shooting at the same time. And the more shield mods you put on the Heavy Bowgun, the stronger and more capable you are of blocking. Now, it should be noted here that if you wanted to max damage with this build, you need to use the special scope. The special scope vastly increases your DPS potential, but I find it a little bit disorienting to use. So whilst I understand it increases your damage output, I tend to steer away from it. Like I said though, if you're looking for max damage, put the special scope on this build. Anyway, for the special ammo you have the Wyvern Snipe, and for your defense you have a strong defense of 940 that is strong against thunder, fire and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you have the following. You have critical eye level 7, increasing our base affinity by a set percent. You have agitator level 5. Agitator is a buff that kicks in when a monster becomes enraged, increasing your raw attack and affinity by a set percentage. You have health boost level 3, allowing us to get our health to that potential 200. You have critical boost level 3, which increases our damage when we crit a monster, but this only applies to the raw attack portion of an attack. It won't do anything to, say, the elemental side of things, but we're not using elemental ammo, so it shouldn't be an issue. Anyway, you have weakness exploit level 3. Weakness exploit increases our affinity when we're attacking monster weak points, and this increase in affinity is even stronger should that weak point be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. This allows us to get to that potential 100% affinity. You have spread shots level 2, increasing the damage of spread ammunition that we are using. You have slugger level 1, which can be potentially level 3 when we're wearing our impact mantle, increasing a build's knockout potential when you're aiming for a monster's head. You have divine blessing level 1, which again can be potentially level 3 when you're wearing the rocksteady mantle, giving us a chance of receiving less damage when we take a hit from a monster. And finally you'll have the razor sharp, or spare shot in this case, level 1. This is all thanks to the razor sharp charm, allowing us to potentially not consume a bullet when we fire the weapon, overall saving on ammunition and the amount of times we have to reload. As for the set bonuses, you only have one, which is Rajang's Rage. which for the 2-set bonus, you'll have the ballistic skill, which basically shortens the distance before ammo and arrows reach their maximum power. In the case of spread ammunition, it allows you to get a little bit further away from a monster and still keep that critical distance. But there you have it, this is the spread build that I tend to go for. As you can see, it is a strong build making use of affinity based skills and a few attack based skills. Unfortunately, you do have to sacrifice a fair amount of skills by using the Razor Sharp Charm, but the spare shot skill that this provides will save you on ammo and the amount of times you have to reload during a duration of a fight, ultimately leading to more DPS. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its high damage output. The other pro for this build is the Stygian Zynoga Heavy Bowgun, or the normal Zynoga Heavy Bowgun, can really capitalise on the spread ammunition, thanks to having a large clip capacity and low recoil when it comes to spread free ammunition. And the final pro is that because we are using spread ammunition, we can pretty much use this build against any monster regardless of their elemental or element weaknesses. But every build has its cons. There are 2 major cons that stand out for this build. First of all, the biggest one, which is more of a con when using spread ammunition, and that is you have to get close to a monster to be most efficient. With the Heavy Bowgun having a slow speed, normally keeping your distance from a monster is optimal, but with spread ammunition you need to get close to deal the most damage. And the other con is unfortunately this build lacks the special scope. As I mentioned when we were talking about custom mods for the bowgun, the special scope vastly increases the damage output of this build. But I for one find it clunky to use, so I'm ultimately taking a hit to my DPS output with this build. But if you are comfortable with it, I'd recommend swapping it out for one of the various mods you have to make this build even stronger. And as a result, as long as you don't mind getting close to a monster, this build can pretty much take on any monster quite comfortably. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the artillery build. This build is all about the sticky ammunition the Heavy Bowgun can utilise, namely the sticky free ammunition with the auto reload function. When you have an ammunition type that has auto reload, it means that after every time you pull the trigger, it will automatically reload at a quick speed. On top of that, because we are focusing on sticky ammunition types, we don't have to worry about affinity at all, or even what a monster's elemental or element weaknesses are. So for this build you'll need the Zora Headgear Beta, the Golden Loon Mail Beta, Zora Claws Beta, the Golden Loon Coil Beta and the Zora Spurs Beta. I'm also using the Razor Sharp Charm again, and for my weapon I'm using the Rajang Destroyer. This has an attack increase augmentation and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. As for your jaws, you need to go for artillery jaws to increase the artillery skill with this build. I've then gone for iron war jaws to increase the guard skill with this build. I've then gone for KO and vitality jaws to provide us the maxed out slugger skill and health boost skill. And then you'll have some jaws to play around with, to which I've gone for jumping jaws to provide us the evade extender skill and a shield jaw to provide us the guard up skill. As for the jaws on the mantles, well, the glider mantle, this is down to personal preference, to which I've gone for hard defense jaws. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You'll have an attack of 533 with minus 15% affinity. You have high deviation. For the custom mods, I've gone for 4 shield mods and a power barrel to increase the knockout potential of this build. You have the Wyvern Heart special ammo, and when it comes to your defences, you have a strong defence of 940, that is strong against fire, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. So as for the skills, you have Artillery level 5. For the Heavy Bowgun, Artillery increases the damage of our sticky ammunition, as well as our Wyvern ammunition. You have Guard level 5, increasing the block potential of this build, meaning that we'll receive minimum knockback when we take a hit, as well as reduced stamina consumption for taking that hit. You have Divine Blessing level 5, vastly increasing the chances of taking less damage when we actually do take a hit from a monster. You have Health Boost level 3, Slugger level 3, Flinch Free level 3, a byproduct of the armour we're wearing, but prevents damage reactions from small attacks. You have Evade Extender level 2. Evade Extender is a result of the optional jaws we're using. Basically it allows us to roll further distances, so this kind of counters the slow movement speed of the Heavy Bowgun when we have it drawn. You have Earplugs level 1, a byproduct of the armour again. This prevents any reaction to very minor monster rolls. You have Guard Up level 1, allowing us to block and blockable attacks, and you'll have the Spare Shot level 1 again. You'll also have Defense Boost at level 6 when we're wearing our Glider Mantle, which increases our defense rating. You'll also have the Zora Magdaros set bonus, Zora Magdaros Essence, Artillery Secret. This allows us to get the artillery skill from level 3 to a maximum of level 5. You'll also have the Gold Rathian Essence, Divine Blessing secret, which allows us to get the Divine Blessing skill from level 3 to level 5. So there you have it. As you can see, it is quite a defensive build, but it still has damage potential thanks to the artillery skill and the Zora Magdaros set bonus. Yes, you could probably increase this damage even further by using some raw attack skills, but for the most part this build works fine against pretty much any monster in the game. It's also considered a comfy build as well, thanks to the sheer amount of defensive options it has available to it. But it should be noted that because we are using the auto reload sticky free ammunition as our primary ammo type, you have to be careful with your shots. Should you just spam fire the weapon, causing your hunters to go into the auto reload animation, it means that if an attack is incoming, you won't have time to block it. So just be aware of that. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its damage through sticky ammo. Thanks to this, it can take on any monster regardless of their elemental or element weaknesses, and it also comes with added knockout potential. Should sticky ammo stick to a monster's head, it has a natural knockout effect, and this coupled with the KO skill allows us to crowd control a monster during a hunt by knocking them out quite often. Which brings us on to our second pro, which is this build is a very defensive build. Thanks to having guard up, guard at level 5, divine blessing, health boost and more, it means that as long as you're being careful, rarely should you faint when using this build. Which brings us on to our third and final pro, which this build can pretty much cope with unblockable attacks and monster ultimates. This means that this build can potentially tank the likes of Safi'Jiiva, Behemoth and more. But every build has its cons. There are two major cons for this build, which is, unfortunately, the auto reload is the most efficient way to pretty much deal out damage with this build, but it does come with the downside that it goes into an automatic animation, which does take a little bit of time, which can result in you taking damage if you're not careful, so you have to time your shots. And the other major con for this build, which is a con pretty much for most heavy bowguns out there, although even more so with this build thanks to the fact that we're using sticky ammunition, which is that you have to actually craft the ammunition during a hunt. You need the materials, the raw materials, to craft sticky ammunition in your bag and have the crafting option on your radial menu so you can quickly craft more sticky ammunition before you run out. But once you get used to it and embrace sticky ammunition, this build is very comfy to use and pretty much can be used against any monster quite effectively. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the piercing shot heavy bowgun build. This build is all about the piercing free ammunition types. It has a high DPS output, high affinity, and when used against long monsters, it will tear them apart quite quickly. So for this build you'll need the Nargacuga Helm Beta, the Rex Royal Mail Beta, the Rex Royal Braces Alpha, the Nargacuga Fouls Beta, and the Nargacuga Greaves Beta. I'm also using a Critical Charm 2, and for my weapon I'm using the Crimson Kodachi Lion 2, which is the Viper Toby Kodachi Heavy Bowgun. This has an attack increase augmentation, affinity augmentation, and then a slot upgrade augmentation. Alternatively, if you don't have the Crimson Kodachi Lion 2, you could always use the Nargacuga Heavy Bowgun. As for your jaws, you've got a little bit to play around with here, to which I've gone for expert jaws, a piercing jaw to max out the piercing skill, tenderizer jaws for some weakness exploit, critical jaw for some crit boost, a mind's eye jaw to provide us that ballistic skill, and we had some byproducts in the form of protection jaws for some divine blessing and evasion jaws for that evade window. As for the jaws and the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for flawless protection jaws, which provide us the peak performance and increase the divine blessing skill, and on the temporal mantle I'm using attack jaws. So, if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health, and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 458 with 70% base affinity. You have no deviation, and when it comes to the custom mods, I've gone for recoil suppressor, ranged attack up, a shield mod, and the power barrel. The power barrel in this case increases the effectiveness of piercing ammunition. So, for example, when you're using Pierce 2, it can feel like Pierce 3. Anyway, for the special ammo you have Wyvern Snipe, and when it comes to your defense you have a decent defense of 911 that is neutral against fire, ice and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and thunder. As for the skills, you have Critical Eye level 7, attack boost at level 4, which can potentially be level 6 when we're wearing mantles. Attack boost increases the raw attack value of the build, and at level 4 or above it also provides us an extra bonus 5% base affinity. You have health boost level 3, critical boost level 3, evade window level 3. Evade window is a combination of byproducts from the armor as well as jaws. This basically increases the invulnerability period when we roll to dodge a monster's attack. Anyway, you have Piercing Shots level 2. Piercing Shots increases the damage of piercing ammunition, which is the main ammo we'll be using with this build. You have Weakness Exploit level 2. We only went up to level 2 with Weakness Exploit on this build because we already had 70% base affinity. And with Weakness Exploit at level 2, it provides us that extra 30% we need to get to 100%, so long as we attack monster weak points that have been tenderized through Clutch Claw attacks first. Anyway, you have Peak Performance level 1, which could be potentially level 3. Peak Performance increases the raw attack of a build so long as you have full health. Anyway, you have Stamina Surge level 1, a byproduct of the gear. This allows us to restore our stamina a little bit more quickly. You have Divine Blessing level 1, which can be potentially level 3. You have Ballistics level 1, which is very important for this build as it does help the critical range with the Pierce ammunition as it pierces through a monster. And finally, for the set bonuses, you have the Nagakuga Essence, True Spare Shot, which works just like Spare Shot, but increases the chances of not consuming a bullet even more so. So there you have it, that is the build I tend to use when using Pierce ammunition. It is quite a straightforward build, focusing on damage more than anything else, and it works wonders against monsters who have multiple hit zones. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its high damage output through a combination of high affinity and intelligent use of the Pierce ammunition, which links directly onto our second pro, which is it's a build that works wonders against long monsters. For example, if you're fighting a brute wyvern, so long as you're shooting them from head to tail or tail to head, there'll be multiple hit zones that the Pierce ammunition will hit along the way, racking up the damage and leading to that potential high DPS output. But should you be facing a brute wyvern and instead shooting it from the side, there'll be fewer hit zones and thus the damage won't be as high. Which brings us on to our final pro, which is it's a build that can be used against pretty much any monster, thanks to the fact that Pierce ammunition isn't elemental based, so we don't have to take into account a monster's elemental or element weaknesses. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest con for this build is it doesn't work against smaller monsters. Say you're taking on monsters with fewer hit zones like Rujan, Kuriaku and that, then the damage output is not going to be as high as it possibly could. And the final con, which again really applies to bowguns in general, is that you may need to craft ammo on the fly with this build. So have the option to craft Pierce free ammunition in your radial menu, as well as the raw materials so you can do this during a hunt. But ultimately, should you be taking on the longer monsters, or the monsters that have really wide wingspans as well, this build can work wonders and take them down quite quickly. Which brings us on to our fourth build, which is a real niche build for the Heavy Bowgun, which is known as the FROSTCRAFT Heavy Bowgun build. This build is all about the FROSTCRAFT skill combined with the Clutch Claw. The goal behind this build is to Clutch Claw to a monster and perform your Clutch Claw attack that has all the bonuses that FROSTCRAFT provides along with other attack bonuses to allow you to deal hard hitting Clutch Claw attacks during a hunt. So for this build you'll need the Fell Shroud Helm Beta, the Rime Guard Nail Beta, the Rime Guard Van Braces Beta, the Rime Guard Coil Beta and the Rime Guard Greaves Beta. I'm also using an Attack Charm 4, and for my weapon I'm using Solomon's Reflection, which is the Shara Ishvalda Heavy Bowgun. This has an attack increase augmentation and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. As for your jewels, I've gone for mostly attack orientated jewels here. Firstly, I've gone for attack jewels to give us some attack boost. I've then gone for a flawless jewel for some extra peak performance, critical jewels for the crit boost skill, Vitality jewels for the health boost skill, maintenance jewels for the tool specialist skill, and finally you have a few jewels to play around with, to which I've gone for artillery jewels to allow us to use sticky ammunition when we're not performing Clutch Claw attacks. As for the jewels on the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for attack and protection jewels. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 515 with 5% base affinity. You have average deviation. For the custom mods, I've gone for close range up mods and a shield mod. And finally for the special ammo, I've got the Wyvern Snipe. The Wyvern Snipe is very important with this build, as it does affect your Clutch Claw attack when you grapple onto a monster, providing a single quick shot, so if you're using it against a moving monster, you have an increased chance of actually pulling off the move without being knocked off. Anyway, as for your defense, you have an okay defense of 908, that is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the skills, you have attack boost level 6, which can be potentially level 7 when we're wearing mantles. You have health boost level 3, critical boost level 3, critical draw level 3. Critical draw is a skill that when we perform a draw and attack, it gives us 100% affinity. And this does apply to the Clutch Claw. So the idea would be to perform the Clutch Claw, latch onto a monster, and then go into the Clutch Claw attack, which will receive the bonus 100% of the critical draw skill. Anyway, you have peak performance level 3, artillery level 3. Like I said, I've only really taken artillery as a precaution to if we can't perform Clutch Claw maneuvers, allowing us to deal some damage when we're on the ground through sticky ammunition. Anyway, you have Quick Sheath level 3, this is a byproduct of the gear we're wearing, but allows us to sheath our weapon more quickly and thus gain the effects of the critical draw more quickly. You have Tool Specialist level 3, reducing the cooldown on our mantles by a large percentage, and the mantles with this build can definitely be useful because they allow you to stay latched to a monster without being knocked off. You have Flinch Free level 2, and Divine Blessing level 1 when we're wearing mantles. As for the set bonuses, you have the Velkhana Divinity. For wearing 2 pieces, you have the Critical Element skill, which isn't really needed on this build. Basically, Critical Element increases our elemental damage when we crit a monster, but we're not really using any sort of elemental ammo with this build. And for wearing 4 pieces of the armor, you'll have FROSTCRAFT, which gives us an additional gauge underneath our stamina bar. This gauge will fill up as a weapon is sheathed. This gauge also has various points on it, which, when each point is filled up, the build will gain increased damage. And with this build being all about doing one hard hitting attack, it means it can really make use of this FROSTCRAFT skill, allowing for maximum damage through the clutch claw attack. But there you have it. As you can see, it is a very niche build and a very unique way of playing the Heavy Bowgun. But unfortunately, it does come with pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its decent burst damage. The clutch claw attacks that have been increased thanks to peak performance, crit boost, crit draw and FROSTCRAFT means that these single hits should be quite substantial. On top of that, it's also a build that when playing in a group, it means that the monster is going to be tenderized pretty much the majority of the hunt. This is thanks to the gameplay style that this build utilizes, which brings us on to the final pro, which is again is a build that can be pretty much used against any monster regardless of their elemental or element weaknesses. But it does have some cons. The biggest con for this build is it's a very niche build, and as a result, it may not be the most efficient against every monster out there. It may also miss out on damage output opportunities that the other more conventional builds can make use of. And the final con is this build's damage output can be interrupted quite easily thanks to the fact that the monster can knock you off of it when you use the clutch claw against it. The mantles can help counter this slightly, as well as the various element ammunition you can utilize, but nonetheless it's a risk when using this build. But if you're looking for something different, something a little bit more fun, that is outside the norm for the Heavy Bowgun, then I'd recommend trying out this build. Which brings us on to our 5th and final build, which is the Artillery Guiding Lance build. This build is very similar to the artillery build we've already shown off, but makes use of the skills that can be utilized in the Guiding Lance, making for efficient and profitable hunts in the Guiding Lance. So for this build you need the Zora Headgear Beta, the Golden Loon Mail Beta, the Golden Claws Beta, the Golden Loon Coil Beta, and the Zora Spurs Beta. I'm also using the Razor Sharp Charm again, and for my weapon I'm using the Rajang Destroyer. This has an attack increase augmentation and then a defense increase augmentation. As for the jaws, firstly we've gone for the mandatory Guiding Lance related jaws. This includes Destroyer jaws for the Part Breaker skill, a Geology jaw for the Geologist skill, and a Fortitude jaw for the Fortify skill. I've also gone for Artillery jaws for the Artillery skill, Iron War jaws for the Guard skill, Vitality jaws for the Health Boost skill, and a Shield jaw to provide us the Guard Up skill. As for the jaws on the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for Hard Defense jaws. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health, and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 553 with minus 15% affinity. You have high deviation. For the custom mods, I've gone for 4 shield mods and a power barrel, and for the special ammo, I've got the Wyvern Heart. As for the defense, you have a strong defense of 940, that is strong against fire, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the skills, you have Artillery level 5, Guard level 5, Divine Blessing level 5, Health Boost level 3, Part Breaker level 3, which is important in the Guiding Lands. Part Breaker is a skill that allows it to break monster body parts more easily, and when it comes to the Guiding Lands, it allows us to break off monster materials from the monster more easily. You have Flinch Free level 3, Earplugs level 1, Fortify level 1. Again, this is a skill that is kind of useful for the Guiding Lands. It allows us to gain increased attack and defense every time we faint, up to a maximum of 2 times. You have Geologist level 1, which again currently is another important Guiding Land skill. This allows us to loot monster materials twice instead of just once, at least from the high tier monsters. Anyway, you have Guard Up level 1, Spare Shot level 1, and a potential defense boost at level 6. As for the set bonuses, you have the Zora Magdaros Essence, Artillery Secret, allowing us to get the artillery skill from level 3 to that potential level 5. You'll also have Gold Rathian Essence, Divine Blessing Secret, allowing us to get the Divine Blessing skill from level 3 to level 5. So as you can see, just like the previous artillery build, this is a very strong defensive and comfy build that can be pretty much used against any monster. Whilst the crowd control capabilities have been replaced with the part breaker skill, it nonetheless makes for an efficient Guiding Lands farming build. But it does have pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is probably again its damage output. Thanks to using the sticky ammunition and artillery skill, we're able to take on pretty much any monster in the Guiding Lands. The next pro is again a strong defensive build, having access to some of the more defense orientated skills, allowing for a build that shouldn't faint often. And the final pro is it's a build that can utilise all the Guiding Lands skills quite comfortably, fitting them into the build without drastic changes. But unfortunately it does have one major con, which, just like the previous artillery build, is you're going to have to craft sticky ammunition whilst you're actually taking on a monster. But regardless, I find this build very comfortable to use in the Guiding Lands. Its damage is sufficient enough that hunts don't take too long, and the build's strong enough to reduce the amount of feints you'll receive. Just remember to be wary of the auto reload sticky ammunition and don't get hit mid reload. So there we have it, those are the endgame builds that I use for the Heavy Bowgun in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now of course there are more endgame builds to come, and as I always say, you don't have to use what is shown in this video, as most tasks in Monster Hunter World Iceborne can be taken on with any weapon or gear set. But anyway, I hope you found this video helpful or informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you endgame builds for the Heavy Bowgun in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.